Daniel Reed sat in the back row of the xenobiology classroom, watching his classmates chatter excitedly about the upcoming assignment. Professor Halm, a tall insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that shimmered like oil on water, stood at the front of the room waiting for silence. The classroom itself was a marvel of engineering, with adjustable gravity fields and atmosphere controls that could accommodate nearly any species in the known galaxy. "Settle down, everyone," Professor Halm said, his voice carrying a pleasant clicking undertone. "Today I'm announcing your next major project. You will each present a companion species from your homeworld. This will help us understand the bonds between sentient species and the creatures they choose to keep as pets." The room erupted in excited whispers. Petra, a crystalline being who sat next to Daniel, turned her faceted head toward him. Light refracted through her body in patterns that Daniel had learned to read as expressions. Right now she looked thrilled. "This will be wonderful," Petra said, her voice like wind chimes. "I can bring a light feeder from Lumina. They are so beautiful when they glow." Orion, a mammalian student covered in soft brown fur, raised his paw from 3 rows ahead. "Professor, can we bring live specimens?" "Yes, as long as proper containment and safety protocols are followed," Professor Halm replied. "The Academy has approved special temporary habitats for this project. Each of you will have 2 weeks to prepare your presentation." Daniel pulled out his data pad and began taking notes. Around him, students were already discussing their choices. Talia, whose species lived in the ocean world of Cascade, made excited bubbling sounds through her translator device. Her people kept small crustaceans that could perform simple tricks. "What about you, Daniel?" Petra asked. "What will you bring from Earth?" Daniel looked up from his notes and smiled slightly. "I'm still deciding. Earth has a lot of options." This was true, though perhaps an understatement. Earth had more species diversity than most worlds in the Galactic Academy database. Daniel had spent his first weeks at the Academy discovering that most planets developed life in much simpler ways. Many worlds had only 1 or 2 major continents, stable climates, and relatively peaceful ecosystems. Earth was different. "I heard Earth has creatures called dogs," Orion said, turning around in his seat. "They sound loyal and friendly." "We do have dogs," Daniel confirmed. "And cats, birds, fish, reptiles. Lots of choices. Reptiles." Talia's translator crackled with confusion. "What are those?" "Cold-blooded animals with scales," Daniel explained. "They need external heat to regulate their body temperature." Professor Halm clicked his mandibles together in interest. "Fascinating. Most companion species are warm-blooded like Orion's people. It makes bonding easier." Daniel nodded but didn't elaborate. He had already decided what he was going to bring, but he wanted it to be a surprise. A big surprise. Over the next week, students began bringing in their preparations. Orion arrived one day with a large terrarium that would house his fluffkin. Through the transparent walls, Daniel could see soft bedding and small toys scattered inside. The habitat was roughly the size of a closet. "Your pet must be very small," Daniel observed. "Oh yes," Orion said proudly. "Fluffkins are about this big." He held his paws apart to indicate something roughly the size of a human football. "They sing when they're happy. It's the most beautiful sound." Petra's habitat was even simpler. She had a floating sphere filled with a special liquid that would sustain her light feeder. The creature itself would arrive the day of her presentation, shipped in stasis from Lumina. "It only needs light and trace minerals," she explained to Daniel. "Very easy to care for. They live for about 10 of your Earth years." Daniel watched as other students prepared their presentations. A methane breather from the outer systems brought schematics for a small flying creature that fed on atmospheric gases. Twin students from a high-gravity world talked excitedly about their rock burrower, an animal that moved through stone the way earthfish move through water. Every single pet was small, docile, and required minimal care. Daniel started to realize just how unusual Earth really was. "Your presentation is in 2 days," Petra reminded him during study period.
"Have you finalized your choice?"
"I have," Daniel said. "The specimen arrives tomorrow." "Specimen?" Petra's lights flickered with curiosity. "That's a scientific term. Most of us just say pet," Daniel shrugged. "It's what we call animals being transported. Don't worry, you'll see soon enough." That evening, Daniel met with Professor Halm in his office to review the safety protocols. The professor's office was filled with holographic displays of various alien ecosystems, each one peaceful and balanced. I need to discuss some special requirements for my presentation, Daniel said. Professor Hom gestured with two of his arms for Daniel to continue. Of course. What do you need? First, I need the classroom temperature raised to 32 degrees Celsius. Second, I'll need the reinforced containment unit, the one rated for aggressive species study. Third, I want to confirm that all safety shields are operational. Professor Hom's antennae twitched with concern. That seems excessive for a companion animal presentation. What exactly are you bringing? Daniel met his teacher's compound eyes steadily. A pet snake from Earth, a green anaconda to be specific. A snake? Professor Holm pulled up Earth's database on his display. His antennae went rigid as images appeared. Daniel, these are predators. Large predators. Yes, sir, Daniel agreed. But people do keep them as pets. I've followed every safety regulation. Apollo, that's my snake, is well-fed and accustomed to handling. He's only 15 feet long, which is actually pretty average. Only 15 feet? Professor Holm's voice rose an octave. That's longer than most species in this academy are tall. I know it seems unusual, Daniel said carefully. But this is an accurate representation of Earth's companion animals. Not all of them are small and fluffy. Professor Hom was silent for a long moment, his mandibles working as he processed this information. Finally, he clicked them in resignation. Very well. Your safety documentation is in order, and the purpose of this project is cultural education. But Daniel, I suspect your presentation will be quite memorable. Daniel smiled. That's what I'm hoping for, Professor. The next day, Daniel's shipment arrived at the Academy's cargo bay. The container was large, temperature-controlled, and marked with several warning symbols that made the cargo workers nervous. Daniel signed for it and arranged for transport to the Xenobiology Lab's secure storage. That night, he checked on Apollo one final time before the presentation. The massive snake lay coiled in his heated habitat, tongue flicking out occasionally to taste the air. His scales were a deep green with black patterns, and his body was as thick as Daniel's thigh. Tomorrow's your big day, Daniel told the snake. Try not to give anyone a heart attack. Apollo, of course, didn't respond. He simply existed in that patient, ancient way that reptiles had. Daniel felt a moment of doubt. Maybe this was too much. Maybe he should have brought something safer, more conventional. But then he thought about all the presentations he'd seen, all the tiny, harmless creatures that other species called pets. If he was going to teach his classmates about Earth, they needed to understand the truth. Earth wasn't a gentle world. It was beautiful and terrible and full of creatures that would seem like monsters to most of the galaxy. And humans had learned to live alongside them. Some humans even invited them into their homes. Tomorrow, his classmates would learn what that really meant. Presentation day arrived with perfect weather simulation in the station's habitation ring. The xenobiology classroom had been rearranged, with a presentation area at the front and stadium-style seating for the students. Daniel watched from his seat as Professor Hom welcomed everyone and explained the schedule. 12 students would present today, with Daniel going last. Orion bounded to the front first, his tail wagging with enthusiasm. He placed his terrarium on the presentation table and dimmed the light slightly. Inside, nestled in soft bedding, was the fluffkin. The creature was small and round, covered in fur that shifted colors from blue to purple. It had large eyes and tiny paws that it used to groom itself. This is Melody, Orion announced proudly. Fluffkins have been companions to my people for thousands of years. They're gentle, affectionate, and they sing to communicate emotions. Orion reached into the terrarium and carefully lifted Melody out. The fluffkin immediately began making soft trilling sounds that filled the classroom with a pleasant harmony. Several students sighed in appreciation. They eat processed grain pellets and live about 20 years, Orion continued. Melody here is 3 years old. Watch what happens when I pet her. He stroked the fluffkin's back gently. The creature's fur brightened to a brilliant gold color, and her song became more complex, adding layers of melody that seemed impossible from such a small creature. The color change indicates happiness, Orion explained. Fluffkins are empathic to some degree. They respond to their owner's emotional state. Professor Hom clicked his mandibles in approval. Excellent presentation, Orion. The bond between your species and the fluffkins is clearly strong. Can anyone tell me what evolutionary advantages this relationship provides? A student from the methane-breathing species raised a tentacle. The fluffkin receives protection and food. The owners receive emotional companionship and stress reduction. Correct, Professor Holm said. A classic symbiotic relationship. Next presenter, please. Petra floated to the front, her crystalline body refracting the classroom lights into rainbow patterns. She activated her containment sphere, and a creature materialized inside the special liquid. It looked like a jellyfish made of pure light with trailing tendrils that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. This is a light feeder from my homeworld, Petra explained, her voice chiming softly. They are not technically alive in the way most species define life. They are crystalline structures that absorb photons and convert them into energy. She adjusted the light levels in the sphere, and the light feeder responded by changing colors, flowing through the spectrum from deep red to violet. The patterns it created were hypnotic, almost like watching music made visible. My people discovered them growing in our crystal caves millions of years ago. Petra continued. We learned to cultivate them and keep them as companions. They require no food except light, and they live indefinitely as long as they receive proper photon exposure. Beautiful, Professor Holm commented. And completely harmless, I presume. Completely, Petra confirmed. They cannot exist outside their liquid medium, and they have no way to harm anyone. They simply exist to create beauty. The presentations continued throughout the morning. Talia brought her small crustacean, which performed tricks like moving through hoops and stacking colored stones. A plant-based species presented a mobile flower that followed its owner around and bloomed in response to carbon dioxide. The methane breather showed holographic recordings of their atmospheric creature, which created spectacular aerial displays in the gas giant's upper atmosphere. Every presentation followed the same pattern. Small creatures, harmless behaviors, simple care requirements. Daniel watched and took mental notes. The contrast with what he was about to show them would be even more dramatic than he had anticipated. During the lunch break, several students gathered around Daniel's sealed containment unit, which had been placed in the corner under security fields. "Why is yours so large?" asked a student whose name Daniel couldn't pronounce. The being resembled a walking fern with multiple sensory fronds. "My pet needs more space," Daniel said simply. "And why is it heated?" Talia asked, her gills fluttering with curiosity. "We can feel the warmth from here. Reptiles are cold-blooded," Daniel explained. "They need external heat sources to maintain their body temperature. Otherwise they become sluggish and can't digest food properly." "Digest food?" The fern student's fronds quivered. "Most companion species eat processed nutrition. What does yours eat?" Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "Whole prey items. Usually rats or rabbits." The group fell silent. Petra's lights flickered in a pattern Daniel had learned meant confusion or concern. "Whole prey," she repeated. "You mean living creatures?" "Well, frozen and thawed, actually," Daniel clarified. "It's more humane that way." "But why would a companion animal need to eat other animals?" Orion asked, his ears flattening slightly. "That seems violent." "Earth's ecosystem is based on predator-prey relationships," Daniel explained. "Carnivores eat herbivores, herbivores eat plants, and everything exists in balance. My pet is a carnivore." Professor Holm approached the group, his antennae twitching. "Perhaps we should save this discussion for Daniel's presentation. I believe we are all quite curious now." The afternoon session began with the remaining presentations. Each one continued the pattern of small, safe, adorable creatures. A zero-gravity species showed off a creature that looked like a floating ball of soap bubbles, completely intangible and feeding on electromagnetic fields. Twin students from a desert world presented a sand swimmer, a creature that burrowed through silicon-based terrain and served as a living seismograph for their people. Finally, only Daniel remained. Professor Holm gestured for him to come forward, and the classroom fell silent. Daniel stood and walked to his containment unit. He could feel every eye in the room following him. "Before I begin," Daniel said, "I want to remind everyone that all safety protocols are in place. There is no danger to anyone in this room." That got everyone's attention. Several students shifted nervously in their seats. "I also want to explain something about Earth," Daniel continued. "My planet developed life very differently than most worlds in the galaxy. We have extreme climate variations, multiple competing ecosystems, and a very active predator-prey dynamic. Life on Earth had to become strong, adaptable, and sometimes dangerous to survive." He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's continents. "We have jungles where it rains every day and deserts where it never rains. We have frozen poles and tropical equators, mountains that reach into the clouds and ocean trenches deeper than anything on most planets. Each environment created unique challenges and unique life forms. Daniel showed images of Earth animals. A lion taking down a zebra, a shark breaching the water to catch a seal, an eagle diving at speeds over 100 miles per hour to strike a rabbit, a bear catching salmon from a rushing river. The classroom was completely silent now. Several students had moved back in their seats. Humans evolved alongside these creatures, Daniel said. We learned to hunt them, avoid them, and eventually some of us learned to keep them. Not because they were safe or easy, but because we found them fascinating, beautiful, even in their danger. He placed his hand on the containment unit's control panel. What I'm about to show you is a common pet in some parts of Earth. Not the most common, but not rare either. Some humans dedicate their lives to studying and caring for these animals. Daniel took a breath and deactivated the opaque screen. This is Apollo. He's a green anaconda from South America. The screen lifted, revealing the massive snake coiled inside the reinforced habitat. Apollo raised his head slightly, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. His body was as thick as a human torso, patterned in dark green and black scales that seemed to absorb light. His eyes were dark and ancient, holding an intelligence that was completely alien to anything most of the students had seen. For a moment, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted across the classroom. 3 students screamed. Not the excited scream of surprise, but the primal sound of prey animals recognizing a predator. Talia threw herself backward so hard that her chair toppled over, sending her sprawling across the floor. Orion's fur stood on end, making him look twice his normal size, and he began making a high-pitched whining sound that his species made when terrified. The fern student's fronds retracted completely into its central stalk, a defensive mechanism Daniel had never seen before. Petra's crystalline body flashed bright red, a color Daniel knew meant extreme distress. At least 6 students bolted for the door, triggering the emergency sensors. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights pulsed along the walls. Professor Hom's forearms waved frantically as he tried to restore order, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. Within seconds, automated security doors began sealing, and Daniel heard the heavy footsteps of security personnel running down the corridor. "Everyone calm down," Daniel shouted, but his voice was lost in the noise. Apollo, disturbed by all the commotion, began moving in his habitat. The sight of 15 feet of muscle uncoiling made several more students flee to the corners of the room. The security team burst through the door, weapons drawn. They were a mixed species unit, but even they stopped short when they saw Apollo. The team leader, a heavily armored being from a high-gravity world, raised a containment weapon. "Stand away from the creature." The security chief barked. "Wait!" Professor Halm finally made himself heard over the alarms. "This is a class presentation. The animal is contained." The security chief lowered his weapon slightly but didn't put it away. "We received multiple panic alerts from this room. Protocol requires us to respond to any biological threat." "It's not a threat," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. "This is my pet. He's completely contained in a reinforced habitat rated for megafauna study. All safety protocols are active." One of the security officers, a being with multiple eye stalks, was scanning Apollo with a handheld device. "Sir, I'm reading a life form with enough muscle density to crush most species in this room. The bite force estimates are off the scale. This creature could kill." "Of course he could," Daniel agreed, "but he won't. Apollo is well fed, properly cared for, and has been handled safely by humans for years." "He's no more dangerous right now than Orion's fluffkin." "That's not true," Orion cried from the corner where he had taken shelter. "Melody can't hurt anyone. That thing is a monster." Daniel felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. Fear was making them react this way, and anger wouldn't help. Apollo isn't a monster. He's an animal. A predator, yes, but just an animal. On Earth, snakes like him are part of the natural ecosystem. Professor Holm was reviewing something on his datapad, his antennae twitching rapidly. "The paperwork is all here." Daniel filed proper containment requests, submitted biological data, and received approval from the Exotic Species Board. "Technically, this presentation is authorized." The security chief looked like he wanted to argue, but regulations were regulations. "Fine. But we're stationing personnel outside this room until the presentation is over. And if that thing makes one move toward escaping containment, We're flooding the room with stasis fields. Understood, Daniel said. Thank you for your quick response. The security team filed out, though Daniel noticed they left the door open and 2 officers remained just outside. Slowly, the students began emerging from their hiding places. Some returned to their seats, though they sat much farther back than before. Others remained standing near the exits, ready to run. Professor Halm manually disabled the alarms, and the classroom fell into an uneasy silence. All eyes were on the habitat where Apollo lay coiled, his head resting on his own body, looking completely peaceful and utterly terrifying to everyone except Daniel. If anyone needs to leave, Daniel said quietly. I understand. This is probably very frightening for most of you. Petra, still flashing red but trying to compose herself, floated back to her seat. No, you said this is educational. I want to understand. Her words seemed to give courage to others. Orion, though his fur remained fluffed and his ears flat, crept back to his chair. Talia righted her overturned seat and sat down, though she kept her distance. One by one, the students returned, though the classroom felt much emptier than before. Thank you, Daniel said. He turned to face Apollo's habitat. I know this is shocking. Earth animals are very different from what most of you are used to. So let me explain what you're seeing. He pulled up a holographic display showing Apollo's skeletal and muscular structure. Green anacondas are constrictors. They don't use venom to kill prey. Instead, they use their powerful muscles to squeeze. They can sense the heartbeat of their prey and tighten their coils each time the prey exhales, until eventually the prey can't breathe anymore. Several students made distressed noises. Professor Holmes' mandibles clicked nervously. Daniel, perhaps we could focus on less disturbing aspects? I'm sorry, Professor, but this is important, Daniel said. If we're going to understand different worlds, we need to understand how life actually works there. Earth is a dangerous place. Humans didn't evolve in safety. We evolved in a world full of creatures that could kill us. He changed the hologram to show a human for scale next to Apollo. This anaconda is about 15 feet long and weighs around 200 pounds. That's more than I weigh. A full-grown anaconda can reach 25 feet and weigh over 400 pounds. They can eat prey as large as deer, pigs, or caimans, which are like earth crocodiles. And humans keep these as pets? Petra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would anyone want such a dangerous animal in their home? Daniel smiled slightly. Not many do, honestly. Apollo is what we call an exotic pet. But some humans find beauty in reptiles. They appreciate their ancient nature, their efficiency as predators, their role in the ecosystem. And yes, some people just think they're cool. He touched the control panel on the habitat. Would anyone like to see him move? No. At least half the class shouted in unison. All right, Daniel said, pulling his hand back. But understand, Apollo isn't aggressive toward humans. In the wild, anacondas avoid people. They're ambush predators that hunt fish, birds, and mammals near water. A healthy, well-fed anaconda has no reason to attack a human. But it could, the fern student said, its fronds barely emerging from its stalk. The potential is there. Yes, Daniel admitted. The potential is there. Just like the potential exists for any large animal to be dangerous. Earth horses can kick hard enough to kill a human. Earth dogs, even friendly ones, have powerful jaws. But we've learned to read their body language, understand their needs, and coexist with them. He walked along the habitat, and Apollo's head tracked the movement with lazy interest. Right now, Apollo is calm. His body is relaxed, his tongue flicks are regular and slow, and he's in his typical resting position. If he were agitated, his muscles would be tense, his movements jerky, and he might assume a striking S-curve with his neck. Striking? Orion whimpered. You mean attacking? Snakes can strike at about half their body length, Daniel explained. But Apollo is a constrictor, not a viper. He doesn't strike to inject venom. He might strike defensively if threatened, but his real hunting method is stealth. He waits in water or vegetation until prey comes close. Then he grabs it with his jaws and immediately wraps his coils around it. Daniel pulled up a video on the holographic display. It showed an anaconda in murky water, completely invisible until a capybara came to drink. The strike happened so fast that several students flinched. The anaconda's coils wrapped around the prey in seconds, and within minutes it was over. The classroom was silent except for a few beings making distressed sounds. Even Professor Halm looked disturbed. I'm not showing this to upset you, Daniel said seriously. I'm showing you because this is reality on Earth. This happens every day in the Amazon rainforest. Anacondas are important predators that keep animal populations balanced. They're not evil or cruel, they're just being what evolution made them. He closed the video and turned to face the class. Humans learned to respect these creatures. We studied them, documented their behavior, and some of us even chose to care for them. Not because we're fearless, but because we understand that danger and beauty can exist in the same creature. Apollo will never be cute or cuddly, but he is magnificent. Professor Holmes slowly approached the habitat, keeping a respectful distance. His compound eyes studied Apollo with scientific curiosity now rather than pure fear. I must admit, Daniel, this is certainly educational. I have never seen anything quite like this creature. Those scales, the muscular structure, the predatory adaptations. Earth biology is far more aggressive than I realized. Earth biology had to be, Daniel explained. Our planet went through multiple extinction events, ice ages, and dramatic climate shifts. Only the strongest, most adaptable species survived. Competition for resources was intense. That pressure created incredible diversity but also incredible danger. A student that resembled a floating gas cloud with sensory tendrils spoke up, her voice translated through a device. How did humans survive in such an environment? You have no natural armor, no venom, no size advantage. By all logic, your species should have been prey. Daniel grinned. We were prey. For thousands of years, humans were hunted by big cats, bears, crocodiles, and other predators. But we had something most predators didn't have: intelligence. We learned to use tools, work together, and adapt faster than evolution could change us. We went from prey to apex predator in a relatively short time. He pulled up another holographic display, this one showing the food chain of the Amazon rainforest. Look at this ecosystem. At the top you have jaguars and anacondas, but humans learned to hunt both. We used spears, traps, and cooperation to take down creatures much larger and stronger than us. Eventually, we became so effective that we had to create conservation laws to prevent us from hunting these predators to extinction. Incredible, Professor Holm murmured. And disturbing. Your species weaponized intelligence itself. We had to, Daniel said. It was adapt or die. But here's the interesting part. Once we became apex predators, once we were safe, some humans started feeling differently about the creatures we had feared. We started wanting to understand them, preserve them, even befriend them. Petra's lights had shifted from red to a cautious yellow. That's why you keep Apollo? Not for protection or resources, but for companionship. Companionship might be too strong a word, Daniel admitted. Apollo doesn't love me the way Orion's fluffkin loves him. Reptile brains don't work that way, but we have a relationship. I provide food, shelter, and proper care. He trusts me enough to allow handling. That trust from a creature that could hurt me if it chose to means something. He opened a small panel on the habitat side. I'm going to feed him now, not live prey. He added quickly, seeing the alarm on several faces. A frozen thawed rat that I'll warm up to body temperature. Anyone who doesn't want to watch should look away. About half the class immediately turned their heads or closed their sensory organs. The rest watched with morbid fascination as Daniel used long tongs to place a dead rat on the feeding platform inside the habitat. Apollo's tongue flicked faster now, sensing the food. His head rose slightly and his body began to shift. Watch his movement, Daniel narrated. See how smooth it is? He's using his belly scales to grip surfaces while his muscles contract in waves. Snakes move differently than legged creatures, but it's just as efficient. Apollo approached the rat slowly, his head moving side to side as he investigated. Then in one swift motion, his jaws opened impossibly wide and he struck. His teeth, curved backward to grip prey, caught the rat, and he began the process of swallowing it whole. 3 more students turned away. Talia made a gurgling sound of distress, but some, like Petra and the gas cloud student, watched intently. His jaw isn't actually unhinged, Daniel explained. That's a common myth. Instead, snakes have highly flexible jaw joints connected by elastic ligaments. They can stretch their mouth around prey much larger than their head. Watch the muscles in his throat work. He's using rhythmic contractions to pull the prey down. The process took about 5 minutes. When it was done, there was a visible bulge in Apollo's body, where the rat was being digested. The snake returned to his coil, his tongue flicking contentedly. That meal will sustain him for about 2 weeks, Daniel said. Snakes have slow metabolisms. They can go months without food if necessary, though I don't recommend it. Apollo eats every 2 to 3 weeks and that keeps him healthy. Professor Halm was taking notes frantically. Remarkable. The efficiency of such a digestive system would be advantageous in resource-scarce environments. But Daniel, I must ask, what is it like to handle such a creature? The psychological aspect interests me. Daniel considered the question carefully. The first time I held Apollo, I was nervous. Very nervous. You're holding something that weighs more than you do. Something incredibly strong. Something that could hurt you if it wanted to. But snakes give signals. You learn to read their body language. If Apollo is tense or moving erratically, I don't handle him. If he's calm like he is now, it's safe. Safe is a relative term, Orion muttered, though his fur had finally started to settle back down. You're right, Daniel agreed. It's never completely safe. There's always risk. But humans accept calculated risks all the time. We drive vehicles at high speeds, we swim in oceans with sharks, we climb mountains. Risk is part of life on Earth. A small student that looked like a mobile mushroom cluster raised a question through its translator. Do other humans think you're strange for keeping such a pet? Daniel laughed. Yes, actually. Most humans prefer cats or dogs. My family thinks I'm a bit odd. My friends don't like visiting my apartment. But there's a community of reptile keepers who understand. We share information, help each other, and appreciate these animals together. Community, Petra repeated thoughtfully. So even among your own species, this is considered unusual behavior? Definitely, Daniel confirmed. Reptile keeping is a hobby, not mainstream. But that's true for many interests. The point is, Earth has such diversity that humans can choose companions based on their individual preferences. Some want warm, fluffy mammals. Some want colorful birds. Some want fish tanks. And some of us want reptiles. Professor Halm clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. This raises fascinating questions about the human psyche. Most species seek comfort and safety. Humans seem to seek challenge and novelty, even in their choice of companions. Maybe that's what surviving a death world does to a species, the gas cloud student suggested. It changes your relationship with danger. You don't just avoid it. You study it, understand it, sometimes even embrace it. That's actually very insightful, Daniel said. Earth taught humanity that danger isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's just part of nature. Fire can burn your home down, but it also keeps you warm and cooks your food. Water can drown you, but you die without it. Predators can kill you, but they also keep ecosystems balanced. He gestured to Apollo, who had settled into a peaceful post-feeding rest. Apollo represents that philosophy. He's dangerous, yes, but he's also a living connection to millions of years of evolution. When I look at him, I see the Amazon rainforest, the ancient world before humans, the raw power of nature itself. That's worth the risk to me. The classroom was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of contemplation. Students were thinking, processing what they had learned. Some still looked frightened, but others showed curiosity, even respect. Talia raised a tentative flipper. Daniel, you said earlier that Apollo isn't even that large for his species. Are there bigger snakes on Earth? Several species, Daniel confirmed. Reticulated pythons can grow longer, though anacondas are heavier. The longest snake ever reliably measured was a reticulated python over 25 feet long. There are unconfirmed reports of even larger specimens. The fern student's fronds trembled. And these creatures just exist? Freely? In your world's environment? In certain regions, yes, Daniel said. The Amazon rainforest, Southeast Asian jungles, African grasslands. Earth has multiple ecosystems, each with its own apex predators. Snakes are just one type. We also have big cats that can take down prey 3 times their size, bears that weigh over 1,000 pounds, sharks with thousands of teeth, crocodiles that can crush bone with their bite. Your planet sounds like a nightmare, Orion said bluntly. Daniel shrugged. To you, maybe. To me, it's home. And honestly, most of Earth is perfectly safe if you're smart about it. Humans have built cities, farms, and civilizations in every climate. We've learned to coexist with danger. It's just normal for us, Professor Halm checked his chronometer. We're running over time, but I think this has been the most educational presentation of the term. Daniel, you've given us much to think about regarding comparative xenobiology and the effects of environmental pressure on species development. The news of Daniel's presentation spread through the station like wildfire. By evening, the academic network was flooded with messages, reports, and heated debates. The xenobiology department's communication channels crashed twice from the traffic volume. Station administration called an emergency meeting. and Daniel found himself summoned to appear before the Academic Safety Board. He sat in the waiting area outside the hearing room. Apollo safely returned to his quarters under triple-lock security. Petra had come with him for moral support, her crystalline body cycling through nervous color patterns. "Do you think they'll expel you?" she asked quietly. "Maybe," Daniel admitted. "I followed all the rules, but I don't think anyone expected me to actually bring an apex predator to class." The door opened and Professor Halm emerged. He looked tired, his antennae drooping slightly. "Daniel, they're ready for you. And Petra, you may attend as a witness if Daniel permits." "Please," Daniel said. "I'd like her there." The hearing room was circular, with seats arranged in a semicircle facing a central platform. 7 board members sat in judgment, representing different species and academic disciplines. Daniel recognized Administrator Quinn, a diplomatic species known for fairness, sitting in the center position. "Daniel Reed," Administrator Quinn began, their voice flowing like water through their translator. "We have reviewed the events of today's presentation. Before we proceed, do you understand why this board has been convened?" "Yes, Administrator," Daniel replied. "My presentation caused panic and triggered emergency protocols. Multiple students experienced significant distress." "That is correct," Quinn said. "We have received formal complaints from 12 students and 3 faculty members. There are calls for new restrictions on Earth fauna in academic settings. Some are demanding your immediate expulsion. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Daniel took a deep breath. "I followed every safety regulation. I submitted all required paperwork weeks in advance. The Exotic Species Board approved my request. Apollo was contained in a habitat rated for megafauna study, with multiple redundant security systems. At no point was anyone in actual danger." A board member with 3 heads spoke next, each head's voice overlapping slightly. "But the psychological danger was very real. Several students may require counseling. One student has already withdrawn from the xenobiology program entirely. Your actions have had consequences." "I understand that," Daniel said, "and I'm sorry people were frightened. But the assignment was to present a companion species from our homeworld to promote cultural understanding. Apollo is a legitimate, if unusual, pet on Earth. How could I provide genuine cultural education without showing the reality of my planet?" "You could have chosen a safer option," another board member argued. This one was covered in feathers and spoke with a clicking beak. "Surely Earth has less threatening pets." "Of course we do," Daniel agreed. "Dogs, cats, hamsters, goldfish. I could have brought any of those, and everyone would have smiled and said how cute they were. But that would have been a lie by omission. It would have let everyone continue believing that Earth is like their worlds, just with different animals." He stood up straighter, meeting the board members' eyes. "Earth isn't like your worlds. It's a death world by galactic standards. We have extreme weather, aggressive predators, and ecosystems based on violent competition. Humans evolved in an environment that actively tried to kill us. We survived by being smarter, tougher, and more adaptable than everything else. That's the truth, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone." Administrator Quinn raised a hand for silence as several board members tried to speak at once, an impassioned defense. "But Daniel, consider the perspective of your classmates. Many come from worlds where the most dangerous creature is equivalent to your Earth's butterfly. To them, Apollo is a monster from nightmares." "I know," Daniel said quietly. "I saw their faces. But isn't that exactly why this education is important? If we're going to have a galactic community, we need to understand each other honestly. That includes the uncomfortable parts." Professor Halm, who had been standing to the side, spoke up. "If I may, Administrator? I believe Daniel raises a valid point. The purpose of the xenobiology program is to foster genuine understanding between species. We cannot achieve that by sanitizing reality. But at what cost?" the 3-headed board member demanded. "We have a duty to provide a safe learning environment. Was anyone harmed?" Professor Halm countered. "Frightened, yes. Disturbed, absolutely. But harmed? No, all security protocols functioned perfectly. The students learned more about environmental adaptation in 1 hour than they might have in an entire semester of theoretical study." Petra spoke up unexpectedly, her chimes clear and certain. "I was terrified during the presentation. I thought I was going to die. But afterward, when I calmed down and really thought about what Daniel showed us, I realized something important." Everyone turned to look at her. Administrator Quinn gestured for her to continue. "We come from safe worlds," Petra said. "Worlds where evolution was gentle, where intelligence developed in peaceful conditions. We take that for granted. We assume that's normal. That's how life works everywhere. But Daniel showed us it's not. Humans had to fight for every advantage, every bit of progress. They earned their place in the galaxy in a way most of us never had to. She floated closer to Daniel. It made me realize how privileged we are, how easy our existence has been compared to theirs. And it made me respect humans more, not less. They survived a world that would kill most of us in days, and they did it without natural weapons or armor. Just intelligence and determination. The room fell silent. Administrator Quinn's fluid body rippled thoughtfully. An interesting perspective. Are there others who share this view? The door opened and Orion entered, followed by several other students from the class. His fur was neatly groomed now and he looked determined rather than frightened. We do, Orion said. We've been talking. Those of us who stayed for the whole presentation. Daniel scared us, yes, but he also taught us something valuable. We drafted a statement. He held up a data pad and began reading. We, the undersigned students of Xenobiology 301, acknowledge that Daniel Reed's presentation was disturbing and frightening. However, we also recognize its educational value. We learned that the galaxy contains more diversity than we imagined, that not all worlds are gentle, and that strength comes in many forms. We request that the board consider the context and intent of the presentation before rendering judgment. How many students signed this? Administrator Quinn asked. 23, Orion replied. Out of 32 in the class. Not everyone, but a majority. The board members conferred quietly among themselves. Daniel couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw disagreement in their body language. Some gestured emphatically, others remained still. Finally, Administrator Quinn spoke. This is a complex situation with valid concerns on multiple sides. The board will deliberate and announce our decision tomorrow. Daniel, you are to remain in your quarters until then. Apollo is to remain in secured containment. This hearing is adjourned. Daniel left the hearing room with mixed feelings. Petra and Orion walked with him through the station corridors. Other students stared as they passed, some with fear, some with curiosity, and some with expressions Daniel couldn't read. Thank you both for speaking up, Daniel said. You didn't have to do that. Yes, we did, Petra replied. What you did was brave. Controversial, but brave. You showed us something true about your species, even knowing we might react badly. Orion's ears twitched in agreement. I'm still not comfortable around Apollo. I probably never will be. But I understand now why you brought him. Earth made humans different. We need to know that if we're going to work together in the future. They reached Daniel's quarters where security had posted guards. The situation would have been almost funny if it weren't so serious. He was confined to quarters not because he'd done something wrong, but because he'd been too honest. Get some rest, Petra advised. Tomorrow will be important. Daniel entered his quarters and immediately checked on Apollo's remote monitoring system. The snake was fine, coiled peacefully in his secured habitat in the xenobiology lab. Cameras showed 2 security officers standing watch outside. He sat down and pulled up his messages. There were dozens from other students, a mix of supportive and angry. His family had sent worried communications after hearing about the incident. And there was one from an unexpected source. It was from a human professor in the engineering department, someone Daniel had never met. The message was short. You did the right thing. Earth needs representatives who don't apologize for what we are. Stand firm. Daniel stared at those words for a long time. Stand firm? That was easy to say, harder to do when facing possible expulsion. But the professor was right. If humans were going to be part of the galactic community, they needed to be honest about their nature. He thought about Apollo, about the millions of years of evolution that had created such a perfect predator, about the Amazon rainforest where anacondas still hunted in murky waters, about Earth itself, that beautiful, dangerous, impossible planet that had forged humanity into what it was. Then he thought about his classmates, creatures from worlds where the greatest danger was weather patterns or resource scarcity. They had never faced a predator, never had to wonder if something in the darkness was hunting them. Their fear of Apollo wasn't irrational. It was a glimpse into a world they couldn't truly comprehend. But some of them were trying. Petra, Orion, and others had pushed past their fear to find understanding. That was worth something. That was worth the controversy. Daniel composed a message to his parents. I might get expelled tomorrow, but I don't regret what I did. If they kick me out for being honest about Earth, then maybe I don't belong here anyway. Either way, I'll be fine. Humans always are. He sent the message and went to check on Apollo one more time through the monitors. The snake had shifted slightly, his scales catching the light. Beautiful and terrifying, just like Earth itself. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight, Daniel could only wait. Morning arrived with a message summoning Daniel back to the hearing room. He dressed carefully in his academy uniform and made his way through corridors that seemed unusually crowded. Students from other programs had apparently heard about the hearing. Some pointed at him and whispered. Others nodded respectfully. The station's human population, small as it was, had grown noticeably more visible overnight. The hearing room was packed beyond capacity. Security had to enforce occupancy limits, leaving dozens of beings waiting outside. Daniel spotted Petra near the front, along with Orion and most of his xenobiology classmates. Professor Holmes stood to one side, and surprisingly, several other human students and faculty members had come as well. Administrator Quinn called the room to order. We have reached a decision regarding the incident in Xenobiology 301. Before we announce it, I want to address the broader implications this case has revealed. The room fell silent. Quinn's fluid body rippled as they spoke. This board has spent considerable time reviewing not just the incident itself, but the context surrounding it. We examined Earth's biological database, consulted with xenopsychologists, and spoke with other human students and faculty. What we discovered was enlightening and somewhat troubling. One of the other board members, the feathered one, spoke next. We found that human students have been systematically downplaying the realities of their homeworld. They speak of Earth's dangers in abstract terms, avoid detailed discussions of Earth fauna, and generally present themselves as no different from any other species. This, we believe, has created a dangerous knowledge gap. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. This could go either way, Administrator Quinn continued. We also reviewed the assignment parameters and found them ambiguous. The phrase companion species was not clearly defined. Professor Halm assumed students would choose typical docile pets. Daniel Reed interpreted it more broadly. Neither interpretation was technically incorrect. The three-headed board member leaned forward, all three mouths speaking in harmony. Furthermore, we must acknowledge that Daniel followed every safety protocol. His paperwork was impeccable. His containment procedures exceeded requirements. The Exotic Species Board approved his request. At no point did he violate Academy regulations. However, Administrator Quinn said, and Daniel's heart sank, the psychological impact on other students cannot be ignored. Several required counseling. One withdrew from the program. The disruption to academic activities was significant. These are real consequences that must be addressed. The room was so quiet that Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. Petra's lights had gone pale with anxiety. Therefore, Quinn announced, the board has decided to take the following actions. First, Daniel Reed is formally reprimanded for failure to adequately warn his classmates and instructor about the nature of his presentation. While he followed technical protocols, he did not sufficiently communicate the psychological impact his presentation might have. Daniel nodded slowly. That was fair, actually. He probably should have been more explicit in his warnings. Second, Quinn continued, new guidelines will be established for presentations involving potentially distressing content. Students must provide detailed descriptions of their subjects in advance, allowing classmates to opt out if desired. This applies to all species, not just humans. Third, and most significantly, this incident has revealed the need for a new course in the curriculum. We are establishing comparative environmental studies, which will examine how different planetary conditions shaped the evolution of intelligent species. This will include frank discussions of predation, competition, and survival strategies. Professor Halm has agreed to develop this course with Daniel Reed serving as a student consultant. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel felt a spark of hope. Fourth, the feathered board member said, we are updating our exotic species protocols to include enhanced psychological assessment requirements. This will help prevent similar incidents while still allowing legitimate educational activities. And finally, Administrator Quinn said, their voice taking on a more serious tone, we want to address the human students and faculty directly. Several humans in the room sat up straighter. Quinn's body shifted to face them more directly. You have been hiding your nature, Quinn said bluntly. We understand why. You feared rejection, discrimination, or being seen as dangerous. But this fear has led to misunderstanding and, as we saw yesterday, dangerous surprises. We are asking you, formally, to be more honest about Earth and its realities. A human professor from the engineering department stood up. It was the one who had sent Daniel the message. Administrator, with respect, we've been cautious because reactions like yesterday's presentation confirm our fears. When we're honest about Earth, people panic. Yes, Quinn agreed. They panic because they are unprepared. Gradual education is better than sudden shocks. We need humans to help us understand your world, not shield us from it. The galaxy is vast and diverse. We can handle difficult truths if they are presented responsibly. The professor nodded slowly and sat down. Daniel saw other humans in the crowd looking thoughtful, some relieved, others still uncertain. Now, as for Daniel Reed specifically, Administrator Quinn said, turning back to him, you are not expelled. You are not suspended. Your academic standing remains unchanged. However, you are required to attend 3 sessions with a cross-cultural communications counselor to develop better strategies for sharing difficult information. Daniel felt relief wash over him like a wave. Thank you, Administrator. I accept these terms. Good, Quinn said. And Daniel, one more thing. Apollo may remain on the station for the duration of your studies, but visits to him must be supervised, and he must remain in the secured xenobiology habitat. No more surprise presentations. Understood, Daniel said, trying not to grin. The board members stood, and the hearing was officially concluded. Immediately, the room erupted in conversation. Students clustered in groups, debating the decision. The human contingent looked both relieved and thoughtful. Several approached Daniel to shake his hand or offer congratulations. Petra reached him first, her lights flashing bright, happy colors. You did it. They understood. Orion was right behind her, his tail wagging despite himself. I'm glad you're staying. Even if your pet terrifies me, the class wouldn't be the same without you. Professor Halm approached. His antennae tilted in what Daniel had learned was amusement. Well, Daniel, you certainly made this semester memorable. I hope you're prepared to help me design this new course. We'll need to cover everything from Earth's megafauna to its microscopic dangers. It's what? Orion's ears flattened. There are microscopic dangers too? Daniel winced. Yes, but let's save that discussion for the new course. No need to panic anyone else today. Over the next week, the station gradually returned to normal, though nothing was quite the same. The Xenobiology department received a surge of applications for the new Comparative Environmental Studies course. Students who had never given Earth much thought suddenly wanted to understand this death world that had produced such an unusual species. Daniel found himself in high demand as a speaker. Other classes invited him to discuss Earth's ecosystems. The station's cultural center asked him to give a public lecture. Even the administration wanted his input on safety protocols for future Earth materials. Apollo became something of a celebrity. Students would come to the xenobiology lab just to observe him through the safety glass, though most kept a respectful distance. Some of the braver ones asked questions, wanting to understand how such a creature could exist. Daniel was always happy to explain. The most surprising development came from Orion. Despite his initial terror, he started attending Apollo's feeding sessions. He would stand far back near the exit, but he would watch and ask questions. I don't understand how you can be so calm around him, Orion admitted during one session. Every instinct in my body screams danger when I look at Apollo. Your instincts are right, Daniel said. He is dangerous. But I've learned to read his body language, understand his needs, and respect his nature. It's not about being fearless. It's about being knowledgeable. That's very human, Orion observed. Turning fear into knowledge. Maybe, Daniel agreed. Or maybe it's just what you have to do when you live on a planet that's trying to kill you. You either learn or you don't survive. Petra, who had also started attending these sessions, added her perspective. I think it's beautiful in a way. Humans could have destroyed all the dangerous creatures on Earth. You had the technology, but instead you chose to preserve them, study them, even protect them. That shows wisdom. Daniel thought about the conservation efforts back on Earth, the wildlife preserves, the breeding programs for endangered species. We almost did destroy them. We drove many species to extinction before we realized what we were doing. Now we're trying to fix those mistakes. It's not always successful, but we're trying. The new course launched the following semester. Professor Halm had worked with Daniel and other human consultants to create a curriculum that honestly portrayed Earth's dangers while contextualizing them within evolutionary biology. The first lecture hall was packed with students from every program. "Welcome to Comparative Environmental Studies," Professor Holm began. "This course will challenge many of your assumptions about how life develops. We will study death worlds, predation strategies, survival adaptations, and the psychological effects of environmental pressure on evolving intelligence. It will be uncomfortable at times. You may see things that disturb you, but you will leave with a deeper understanding of the diversity of life in our galaxy." He gestured to a display showing various planets, Earth among them. "We will examine multiple high-stress environments, but we will spend considerable time on Earth. Why? Because Earth represents an extreme case. It is a world where almost everything evolved to either kill or avoid being killed, and yet it produced a species that not only survived but thrived. A species that learned to turn their greatest threats into companions, resources, and subjects of study." Daniel sat in the front row, Apollo's presence in the building below a constant reminder of how this all started. He thought about that day, the screams, the panic, the chaos. It seemed dramatic now, almost funny in hindsight, but it had started something important. Students from dozens of worlds now wanted to understand Earth. They wanted to know how humans survived, how they thought, what made them different. And humans, for the first time since joining the galactic community, felt free to be honest about their origins. After the lecture, a small student approached Daniel nervously. The being resembled a collection of mobile crystals loosely held together by electromagnetic fields. "Excuse me," the student said through a translator. "I wanted to ask about Earth's oceans. I'm from a water world, and I heard that Earth has dangerous marine life." Daniel smiled. "We do. Sharks, for example. Some species grow over 20 feet long and have rows of serrated teeth designed to tear flesh. Then there are orcas, which hunt in coordinated pods and can take down prey much larger than themselves. Saltwater crocodiles that can hold their breath for hours while waiting to ambush prey. Giant squids with tentacles covered in hooks and beaks strong enough to crack shells." The student's electromagnetic field flickered with what might have been fear or fascination. "And humans swim in these oceans?" "All the time," Daniel confirmed. "We surf, dive, sail, and study marine life. We've learned which areas are safer and how to minimize risks. Some humans even swim with sharks deliberately." "Your species is insane," the student said, but there was admiration in the translated tone. "Bravely, fascinatingly insane." Daniel laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe we just have a different relationship with risk. When everything on your planet can kill you, you either hide forever or you learn to live alongside the danger. Humans chose the second option." He walked back to his quarters that evening, the station's artificial sunset painting the corridors in warm colors. Through the windows, he could see other ships coming and going, beings from hundreds of worlds all gathering in this one place to learn and grow together. Earth was far away, a small blue marble lost among billions of stars, but it had shaped humanity in ways that couldn't be erased by distance. The challenges of that deadly, beautiful world had made humans adaptable, curious, and uniquely capable of thriving in uncertainty. Daniel passed a group of students arguing animatedly about predator-prey dynamics. Two of them were human, explaining something to three alien classmates. The aliens looked shocked but engaged, asking questions and taking notes. This was what he had wanted. Not to scare anyone, not to prove humans were tough or special, just to share the truth about where they came from. To help the galaxy understand that humanity's strength came not from being fearless but from learning to live with fear and transform it into knowledge. He checked his messages and found one from home. His younger sister had sent a video of their family's backyard. Their dog was playing with the family cat while a hawk circled overhead. Normal Earth life, predators and prey and humans all existing in the same space. "Miss you," his sister's message read. "But I'm proud of you. You're showing them what Earth is really like. Keep being honest. And give Apollo a rat for me." Daniel smiled and sent back a reply. Then he pulled up the monitoring feed for Apollo's habitat. The snake was coiled peacefully, having recently shed his skin. A new layer of scales, fresh and vibrant, ready for whatever came next. Just like humanity itself, Daniel thought. Always adapting, always growing, always ready for the next challenge. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. Earth was just one small world among billions. But it was a world that had taught humanity lessons no other species had needed to learn. And now finally they could share those lessons honestly. Daniel turned off the feed and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, more humans were traveling, exploring, and learning. Some would face their own Apollo moments, times when their Earth nature would shock or frighten others. But now there was a framework for understanding, a path toward honest integration. The class had shown off their pets, and the human had unleashed an anaconda. It had been chaotic, frightening, and controversial. It had also been necessary, educational, and ultimately, the beginning of real understanding between humans and the wider galaxy. And that, Daniel decided, was worth every moment of panic, every accusation, and every uncomfortable conversation. Truth was always better than comfortable illusions, even when truth had scales and could swallow prey whole.